Okay, perfect. So, good morning and thank you for joining us for our webinar this morning, where we'll be talking about Salesforce and implementation projects for nonprofits, and really talking about tackling some of the common misconceptions. And we really want this to be an opportunity for you to ask our expert panel, Rob and Leanne, any questions that you have, any queries, to try and make this as interactive as possible. So before we get started, just some etiquette for the webinar. Just to say that this session is being recorded. Also, just to be aware, there is a new Zoom feature, so that if any people do join later, there may be a voice that comes up saying the session is being recorded from a consent point of view. So don't be frightened, it might pop up, so just to be aware. For the Q&A box is for any questions that you have for the panel throughout the session, and we do ask you please to put in as many questions as possible, and we will cover them off. As I say, we want this to be as interactive as possible. If you have any technical problems or technical questions, please use the chat box, and my lovely colleagues are working away in the background and they will be keeping an eye on them. And then also just to say to check that your microphone is on mute throughout the session. So just to introduce our panel for today, so I'm Joyce Harman, I'm a consultant at Hart Square. I'm delighted to have today my colleague Rob. Rob, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Sure, yeah, hi Joyce, Rob Bell, I'm the Managing Director at Hart Square.
Thank you. And also we have Leanne from Salesforce. Leanne.
Good morning, Joyce. So Leanne McGrory, I'm the Country Manager for the UK and Ireland at salesforce.org.
Fantastic, thank you. So just before we go into the interview, we'd just like to run a quick poll. This is really just to kind of give us an idea of, where people are that are on the session with us, and that will then sort of help us frame some of the questions. So if you could just fill that in, that would be really helpful. I'll just give that another few seconds. The figures are moving around a lot, so I'll just give it another sec. Okay, and I think I'll just end polling now and let me then share the results. So looking at that, we've got a good percentage that are using Salesforce and that are happy with the system. And actually, and a good few people who are using Salesforce but looking for some further assistance. So I think that'll be really good. So, pop in any questions about what that further assistance is, and we'll see if we can help cover them off today. Some people using another system, and then there's some that are either thinking about using Salesforce or they're looking for a new system but haven't decided on any technology yet. So again, maybe to try and help you answer some of those questions for those of you that are considering either Salesforce or another system, pop in those questions and we can try and cover them off today. Great, so I'm just going to stop sharing the results. And now just to move on to the good bit where you get to ask all the questions of Rob and Leanne. So we've done very brief introductions. So I suppose, Rob, if I start with you, could you just tell us a little bit more about yourself, sort of your background in the non-for-profit sector and your experience in relation to Salesforce?
Sure, yeah, so yeah, to say, Managing Director, recently appointed as Managing Director of Hart Square, but I've worked here since its earliest days really, and previously worked at a non-profit, so I was a head of IT, a membership body for several years before that as well. Most of my career has been spent really around healthcare related organisations prior to that as well, so I've always had a connection to and a passion for really for the non-profit sector. When I joined Hart Square, that was as a consultant, as a project manager, so I've got like a deep experience of all the aspects of our work with clients, and for most of my time I've had some kind of remit around understanding the technology offerings available to the sector, to our clients, and working closely with those partners who do serve the sector. So that's always been a significant part of my role within Hart Square. In terms of Salesforce itself, I mean, it's routinely acknowledged as the #1 CRM in the world, and Salesforce.org, the foundation as they were previously, in whatever guise, Salesforce has always been a leading light really for the sector for many years. So we've engaged closely down the years with .org and the foundation, worked hard to understand the offering, all to help our clients really assess Salesforce properly when they're reviewing their technology choices, to be honest. And so through those natural projects. You know, we work closely with many clients who've assessed Salesforce as part of a procurement process, and we deliver projects with clients who've selected Salesforce as their CRM. And then, of course, we'll touch on it later, but we also dive deep into the whole proposition when we were researching and writing the definitive guide for Salesforce for nonprofits, which I led on as well.
Perfect, thank you. And Leanne, the same question to you.
Thank you, Joyce. So a bit about me. I've worked alongside the nonprofit sector for 17 years with technology companies. I spent 15 years at Blackbaud. There I worked across the UK, Australia, New Zealand, and then came back to Blackbaud and spent the last couple of years of my career as the Managing Director of Blackbaud Europe. And in that time, just spent a lot of time with some, as you can imagine, some amazing organisations. I was higher education manager for quite a bit of my time in the UK and Australia, New Zealand. So although my role today at Salesforce is focused on charities, I do have a great network and understanding of the higher education space as well. I joined Salesforce.org just a little bit over 18 months ago. First, I looked after INGOs, so some of the well-known household names like Gavi, the Global Fund, World Health Organization, Greenpeace, some amazing organizations in what we call the enterprise space across Europe. And as of this year, now I have a more specific focus supporting our charity sector across the UK and Ireland. So most of my career has been in nonprofit technology and really helping those organisations realise the value of investment in technology.
Fantastic. I'm very jealous of all the travelling and different places you lived, have to say. So I suppose, Salesforce, it has changed a lot over, the last 10 years, although I know you say you've only been there sort of 18 months, but, how would you sort of describe that, that evolution or that change over the last, number of years?
Yeah, I think you're right, Joyce. It has changed a fair bit. I think Salesforce.org, or where we started as the Salesforce Foundation, really has always been the heart of Salesforce. Some of you might have heard of Mark Benioff and Parker Harris's way they set the company up was with the 1-1-1 model, and that was 1% of licenses or technology, 1% of volunteer time, and 1% of income would go back into the nonprofit sector. So Mark's always been a sort of a loud voice talking about the role of businesses giving back and supporting the sector. So the Salesforce Foundation really focused on that 1-1-1 model along with the grants program. And I think that, when we think about, well, there's different ways that Salesforce gives back to the sector. We talked about the 1-1-1 model. So part of that is any charity in the world can take 10 free licenses from Salesforce. We've had that since our inception 21 years ago. And then the other thing that we do within what was the foundation, which is now Salesforce.org. So Salesforce.org is a dedicated business unit within Salesforce that focuses on supporting the nonprofit sector. So that's philanthropic organizations, higher education institutions, and nonprofits. So in 2019, Salesforce brought Salesforce.org back into Salesforce. And that's been amazing because that's really allowed faster investment in linking the amazing technology platform we have with Salesforce and bringing that together with customer impact. We've seen in the last couple of years more releases, more capability, more innovation. And even just in the past 12 months, we've released grant management functionality, online communities functionality, case management, and so really focused on that single view of the customer. The other big thing that has been an amazing evolution for us is a big focus on the Sustainable Development Goals or the global goals. Again, I don't need to tell this audience, but that's the 17 global goals, that with the United Nations General Assembly. So we're all striving towards those by the year 2030. So we've really had a big focus on our role in the global goals and huge investment in helping achieve those. The last thing I'll say on the evolution of Salesforce is previously, there was a big, we worked, our partners had a big role to play, our Salesforce.org partner community in taking Salesforce into the sector. And I think over the past few years, we've taken much more of a role in that. And so we really want to, have a very strong relationship with our customers, not just the partners, but us also. And a big part of that is, helping grow, get a great feedback loop and growth planning into our Nonprofit Success Pack. So Nonprofit Success Pack, which is part of the Nonprofit Cloud, we've had a specific nonprofit offering now for 11 years. So if you think of it as a pre-built package built on top of Salesforce to meet the needs specifically of those nonprofit organisations. So it really talks the processes, speaks the language. And in the UK and Ireland alone, we have just under 3,500 nonprofits use Salesforce technology. And what's really interesting is about 65% of those just use the 10 free licenses. So it's a real honour to support, almost 2,500 organisations with free technology. And then our values have never changed in that evolution. So the values at Salesforce are trust, customer success, innovation, and equality. So it's been a fun evolution over time. We were the foundation, we're now salesforce.org, but we've always had the same role supporting nonprofits.
No, it's fantastic. And I think definitely that, the point about the free licenses, it's, it does make a huge difference to, a lot of small organizations. Rob, I wanted to come to you. Looking at Hart Square, we know, Hart Square work independently across, all the different CRM platforms that are out there. And as you mentioned earlier, we recently published the definitive guide. And I suppose really, what are the most common questions about Salesforce that you're hearing from non-for-profits? And I suppose then what were the driving factors to put together that guide?
Sure. So yeah, I mean, we're here to discuss some of those myths and preconceptions and things. So highlighting those, focusing on that side of it for the question. I mean, we often hear things like how Salesforce is expensive to run, or how complicated it is, how neither Salesforce nor the software is kind of suitable for the third sector. It's got sales in the name, so that's a clue, right? And also actually how there's a kind of lack of sector specialists, let's say that, to implement it. So, on the other hand, we've also the experience I was talking about earlier. We talk to and work with a lot of nonprofits who have adopted Salesforce. We get confirmation from them and from the projects that we work with them on about its capabilities and its power, and it actually delivers on the proposition. And we find, advocates really, who have a real passion for the technology and for the whole environment around it. So yeah, I mean, you'd expect it with any technology solution, any discussion about technology. There are definitely questions to address. There are preconceptions out there that we need to talk to. But probably what we see then is a kind of mix of myths, of perceived complexity, and in part, in comparables, people are always going to make comparisons. There is that comparison, say, with Microsoft, which people are more familiar with because it kind of, most people, rash generalization time, but most people within the sector are using kind of Windows desktop, and so there's that kind of head start they get from that. And the definitive guide really, was drawn up to try and help us, or for us to try and help clarify the situation around some of those really important considerations that are, or potentially cloud people's assessment of Salesforce before they even get started. And I can pick those off. I mean, the Salesforce can be expensive to run. Well, sure it can. If you're of that size and scale, it can be expensive, but it is comparable with other technologies that have the same capability. Yeah, so it's not relatively expensive. It can be very cost effective. Leanne makes a really good point. A huge number of organizations, thousands of organizations, are using it without paying a dime. So it's not a very simple. It's a great myth to put out there. It's very helpful for some people to put it out there, but it's not a reality, actually, that Salesforce is more expensive than other comparable solutions. Simply not true, not what we find anyway. Complexity, yeah, it is complex to get the best out of it, because what nonprofits want to do can be complex. Yeah, so I'd say not complicated. Yes, it can be complex, but there's a great wealth of material and organizations around to help nonprofits get the best out of it. So again, one purpose of the guide, if you look at the different components within the guide, was all about contributing to that, to help people to help decomplexify. That's not a real word, is it? There's a proper word in there somewhere, which is what I was trying to say, to make it more accessible, to make it more understandable. So again, one of the components of the guide, and Leanne mentioned it earlier, the nonprofit success pack, baked into the very heart of Salesforce, this big commercial monolith, yeah, but baked at the very heart of it, the 111 proposition from day one, genuinely delivered on year after year. Millions and hundreds of millions of dollars of grants have been made out to worthy organizations around the world, and continue to do that from the start. And a contribution in terms of the nonprofit success pack, features and functionality specifically designed for the nonprofit success pack, for the nonprofit sector. So again, myth, Salesforce not designed for non-profits or not suitable for non-profits? Absolutely not the case in our experience. So we want people to understand that, to be more open and to get that. What else? Oh, yeah, and finally, sorry, the other point was about the sector specialists. Again, Leanne rightly mentioned the number of partners that are out there. There are system implementation partners is the terminology that is used around that. And these are organizations who, they know their Salesforce and they know the sector. They're, name check a few, the likes of Hyphenate, Economic Change, Zurico, Presido, Imprisia, they are chock full of experts and expertise and experience. They share the passion for the sector that we have and that Salesforce.org have, and they have the skills and the motivation to configure and deploy Salesforce nonprofits in support of missions and causes. So again, for us, we look at it and we see a really strong, range of organizations, different size, different scales, different specialisms within them, who are absolutely, they're dedicated and focused on getting the best out of Salesforce, the technology for the sector. So we'd like another myth we were trying to debunk.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. And Leanne, I suppose from that, we're going to unpick some of those misconceptions, but is there any of those in particular that sort of really resonate or sort of chime with you?
Yeah, I think there's three for me, Joyce. So in my previous roles, I came from a company where we would develop, sell, and implement and support the same product. And so, having everything in one place is really the business model of a lot of more legacy fundraising tools in particular. And coming into the Salesforce network, I sort of took me a little bit of time to get my head around this partner network. And I think what I've come to realize is there's a real power in that network. And an important point is we have about 24 partners in the Salesforce.org program for the UK and Ireland. What those partners do, a lot of the times they come from the sort of older technology platforms, so they really understand the way that some of those older solutions work. But they're not building new products on top of the Salesforce platform. That's not our model. What they're doing is taking the pre-built best practice that we have in the Salesforce platform and implementing those, tailoring those to the needs of the nonprofit based on where they've come from or based on where they're going to. So, huge network, but they're not building new products that, potentially could be out of support if something was to happen. So really getting the most out of that. The other thing I hear a lot in the sector is, Salesforce it's great for big charities, but it's large, it's complex, and it's expensive. And what I would say is, it is a large system, right? It's the number one CRM in the world, 8 years running now. So amazing technology. But what we've done with Nonprofit Cloud is we've, as I said earlier, we've built the most common processes, reports, we use the right language. You're not opening up your system to talk about customers and sales and income. You're talking about supporters and engagement and lifetime value. So it's a pre-built set of tools. So it is large, it can scale across lots of different types of functions a nonprofit can make use of, but the key components are already there. And I think the last one just to address is expensive. That's a hard one to try and address because it depends on where an organization is coming from and how they think about that expense. If you're coming from an off-the-shelf package that you've had for 10 years, a move to Salesforce or another platform play, could be a lot more to invest in. But I would then also, we try and work really closely with our nonprofit customers to look at value. 98% of nonprofits that use Salesforce technology say that it's helped them improve the way that they do their work. And 68% of organizations fundraising on Salesforce say it's helped them improve their overall income. So I think it comes down to that value discussion, when we think about something being expensive, and really making sure that you work really closely with the Salesforce team to plan out, what do you want the system to do over time. I'll also end that point with, we do want our customers to pay more over time because we think there's more that they could use on the platform. So you might start off, for example, using Salesforce for fundraising, but then we could show you, maybe in a couple of years' time, you might then say, let's move case management, grant management, service desk, online communities, digital engagement. There are other things the platform can bring in over time. But again, we want to work with our charity customers on when that makes sense and why it makes sense.
Yeah, perfect. And we've a good question come in, which I'll make sure we cover in a bit, which is really around, how do you work out if Salesforce is an option we consider? So I'm going to come back to you both on that. But just really one of the common queries that, that we often get asked is in relation to how much client-side technical expertise you're going to need. And in addition to the implementation partner. So just really wondered, sort of what your thoughts are on that. So also that people don't have any surprises once they've sort of started on the implementation. I was going to go to you on Rob first on that, and then I'll come to you, Leanne, if that's okay.
Sure. So, I mean, in part, I guess this talks to the different types and the different scales of organizations you may be implementing. But for me, really, if you choose the right technology partner to work with, the implementation partner, then you don't need to have great technical expertise within your team. You need some people who are tech savvy, who can, enough to learn and understand what the tech can do. That's fair enough. But the tech partner is there to configure and deploy the solution for you technically. Your contribution really as a client is in describing what you need the solution to enable you to achieve. So that's where I think there's a distinction in that. I don't think you don't have to suddenly come up with this great in-house team of of tech experts. Having said that, you will almost certainly want to train up, a member of your staff to be, a certified Salesforce admin as part of your move to BAU, to enable you to get the best out of the solution down the line. And doing that, if you do that during your implementation project, then that will help you to understand what the solution is capable of and help to avoid the surprises that you mentioned in the question. And one of the opportunities that Salesforce does offer is that as a client, you may choose to bring in or upskill a technical team to enhance the solution yourselves. As Leanne described earlier, the partners don't build new features as such; they configure the solution to achieve outcomes for a client. And you are able, you as a client own that, you're able to take it forward and develop it yourself. So it's an option for you to do that, but it's absolutely not a necessity in our experience.
Yeah, and actually, Leanne, sorry, just before you answer, because it does follow on to this question that's just come in, and it was around, what are the key roles you'd recommend, to have in place for a non-for-profit with Salesforce implementation? And in this situation, they're a membership organization with around 100 staff and approximately 45 licenses. So it's just kind of, because I thought that feeds quite nicely actually into that question. So if Leanne, if you want to go, and then if Rob, if there's anything else you want to add after.
Yeah, I agree with Rob. I think it often depends on the size of organisation, the ways that you're using Salesforce technology, and whether you've got an appetite to to integrate to other systems or just have the system sit on its own. I think to get the most out of your technology, most organisations should invest in expertise. Now, whether that's a database manager, an administrator, a developer, or an external consultant. I think that for a really small organisation, that might be a few hours a week, and that could be a support company that do that. For a large organisation, that could be a team of administrators. But I don't think that's any different for Microsoft, Blackbaud, Salesforce, or others. I think that the Salesforce team and the partner network are really there to help our customers get a sense of what will the support look like. But I do know, again, from my previous role, most organizations would have the loved database manager that would be like the expert of the system. And I think you probably want to get that, even if it's just a part of someone's role, you'd really want that internally. I'd also say in the Salesforce world, people build careers on Salesforce. And so becoming an expert on the system is something that we'd certainly encourage. And one of the things we do to encourage that is we have this wonderful e-learning system we call Trailhead. And Trailhead is an online e-learning system, and it has hundreds, if not thousands, of free training courses. And you can go on a trail, right? It's all about sort of hiking in the forest, but a trail these are a set of connected topics that will help you learn a certain thing. And it might be best practice in online fundraising. It might be, how to dedupe within the system, but there are lots of ways that you can do that. And most of it's free. There's a little fee to be properly certified and get a certification against your name. But yeah, I've seen lots of people really build strong careers on Salesforce technology. And for the most part, that's free. The problem we have in the sector, of course, is time challenge. We have lots of people that wear people that wear lots of hats. I would leave by saying if if you're familiar with database terminology and database management, Salesforce is not difficult to pick up.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, Rob, was there anything else you wanted to add on to that point about the team?
Yeah, I think not to go too far off kind of topic on that, but I think the other thing to consider, I echo what Leanne said about those kind of roles around the technology itself. The big piece is really for an organization which is running Salesforce in the kind of mode you described, is actually to have effectively a kind of a product owner, somebody whose time is invested in understanding what the technology they now have in place is capable of achieving for or helping the organization to achieve. So somebody who can understand that, who can promote certain aspects of it, who can advise the business on the organization on how best to use the system, to gatekeep requests that come in, that kind of role actually, which is a kind of a business analyst type role, but product owner is kind of what we think about. Doesn't have to be heavily technical, but obviously the more you understand the technology and through the interface, the better. But that's really where you really start to leverage and get your ROI back for the implementation.
Yeah, perfect. And then I suppose, Rob, I wanted to follow on. Hart Square, do a number of about 30 partner selections a year, and obviously they include a lot of Salesforce partners. But specifically looking at the Salesforce partners, and I think Leanne mentioned there's about 24 currently. How can people differentiate between the different Salesforce partners and what their offerings are?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, so for me, the answer is probably twofold. You look at the specialist areas that the SIs, the partners talk about, and you can see that through the marketing that they produce, through their websites, through the clients they've worked with. Some very, very strong, for example, on things like grants management, administration, some stronger on volunteer management, membership management, the individual fundraising piece, so they have specialisms within them, as well as being, very, very capable of deploying the technology in certain ways anyway. So that's certainly something which is a differentiator between them, and you don't just talk to one, right? You can talk to several and compare and contrast, sort of thing. And then I guess the second part is something, again, that we talk about quite a lot at Hart Square, which is that, a core component of your success in any implementation project is about finding a partner who you connect with. At the end of the day, we're peoples and organizations. I mean, the third sector, right, it's all about people and relationships. We have character, personality, we have organizational culture, and we connect best with certain types of people and certain types of other organizations. So, you have choices. Do you want your partner to be quite kind of gentle with you, accommodate everything that you want to do, and it's all nice and soft and that? Or actually, do you want someone who's a little bit hardline to help you get to where you need to be? They're much more directive, much more, no, this is what we set out to do, this is what we're going to do. So real compare and contrast, there's no right and wrong on that, but those are the kind of factors and considerations I would play into it. Leanne, I can see you smiling at that already.
No, I agree with that, Rob. And I think in some ways in the Salesforce network, you can be a bit spoiled for choice because there are some incredible partners that we work with. But if you imagine that those partners go from Deloitte and PwC, huge global system implementers, right down to very boutique, consulting firms that all specialize in grant management, for example. So I think that, and the other thing is, trying to get a sense of, do you want a partner to come in and just do the project and just migrate you from this system to that system, or are you interested in a shared implementation where your team learn along the way and take part in some of the configuration and testing? So there's a lot to be considered, but I would say it's not very often that most nonprofits will make a big technology change. And again, whether it's just changing your grant management system or just changing your case management system, we can help with that. And I think we know our partner network very well. So if you and I, Robert, had to have a conversation about making a change, my role is to ask you lots of questions, understand what your goal is, get a sense of what budget you had in mind, what timeline you had in mind, and then I would recommend 2 or 3 partners for you to have a chat with. And it's it's a lovely world in the sector. It really is. Let's just have a conversation, see who you sort of gel with, and that gives you a good sense of how to go forward.
I think, sorry, Joyce, I think there's a point under there as well, because it kind of talks into some of that complexity we were discussing earlier. People don't always understand actually the role and the really strong supportive role that Salesforce.org play in this, which is a standout compared to some of the competitors. So to be able to work with Leanne and her colleagues, through .org to select the right partner, at the beginning or when it's a later enhancement or whatever it may be, to have that underlying relationship that's supported by Salesforce.org, and the rest of the nonprofit cloud, the apps and the app exchange and the network that goes with all of that. There's a lot more to it than just this is your partner and that's the only option you've got. So I think it's really, you know, when people are considering that and thinking about the partner and what they're signing up for, understanding the whole lot of the offer, which can sometimes, as Ben said, can sometimes be a little bit overwhelming, actually, but it's got a real strength behind it, you know, and that underpinning by Salesforce.org, I think is a key part of it.
Yeah, perfect. And we've got some great questions coming in, specifically around the non-profit success pack and actually around grants management. And nice that you just mentioned that a minute ago, Jan. But I'll come to them in a second, because one question that comes in, which always comes up, is around budget. So, you know, there's always still some perception around it's difficult, you know, to fully understand the costs, you know, for a Salesforce project, and that, you know, very often is that people not understanding that you need to have a clear scope right from the start in order to be able to understand what your costs are. You know, just really to understand your views on that, and possibly also, which very often happens, sort of, you know, scopes do change sort of sometimes throughout projects. So maybe if I come to you, Leanne, first on that, and then I'll come to you, Rob.
Yeah, it's you know, it's a big question with lots of different parts to it, I think, Joyce, in terms of you know, is Salesforce expensive? Can a project be expensive? Can a project, you know, the cost change over time? The best way to approach a project, again, regardless of what your change is or why you're making a change, is to have a really good sense of your requirements. Now, you can do that with an organization like Hart Square, help gather requirements and look at what your future goals look like. You can do it internally. We can help. We train our team a lot, very deeply, to go through discovery, like really understanding what are your goals, why are those your goals, what are you trying to achieve, what do you use today. So I think the first point is really understanding what you want to achieve and have a good understanding of the scope or the functionality that you want to implement. We can also help you work with the partner to make sure that the investments the partner give for an implementation and a go live are you know, accurate to what you're trying to achieve, and also making sure that you really understand how that scope works, what the project is looking to have outcome. So the implementation partner's role is to deliver project deliverables. So make sure you have that clear scope. And then I think the other thing is, you know, sometimes we'll have an organization come to us and say, we're thinking about implementing Salesforce. We feel really good about it, but we hear that, you know, storage could be really expensive over time, or, you know, there might be add-ons that we need to buy over time. And the nice thing is to say, okay, that's a concern. Let's sit down and work it out. Here's what we see. This is how we see it work. And maybe there's a sort of, you know, there are ways that we can actually cap, limit, or predict, you know, the way that those costs might work over time. Again, I'll bring it back to, we want you to get more value from the Salesforce platform. So if you're bringing other systems into Salesforce, if you've you know, more donations coming in, that sort of stuff, we want to help you predict that and you know, plan for that growth. Don't know if that answered the question well, but I'll pass to you, Rob.
No, I think you know, certainly that like you say, the key point about, you know, agreeing your requirements up front, getting your scope solid, you know, and I think, you know, everyone, hopefully people do know, you know, how these projects work. You know, you appoint. So you go through a good process, you know, you've gathered your requirements, you've shared with partners what it is you want to do. And as Leanne says, again, you know, that's about the objectives, what are you trying to achieve, not just what you want the tech to do as such. But once you then choose who you're going to work with, so you said we want to use Salesforce and we're going to run with this partner, the first piece of work is that kind of that deeper discovery phase, at the end of which you solidify really, and okay, this is our scope for what we want, call it phase one, but this is what we want, and it's got a cost and a timeline associated with it. And that's really important, that you have that next stage and you have that kind of milestone reflection before you make that final commitment then to build out and know what that cost is going to be. And I think then it is actually about being a bit disciplined and about holding your nerve. You will, as you start to see what modern technology like Salesforce can do, you will be at times, you know, you will at times be inspired and be having all these fantastic ideas about, oh, we could do this, we could do that, new initiatives, new ways of working, fantastic. But you're going to have to kind of capture them, bottle them, and save them. Yeah, save them for after, because you want to get the modern tech in place, learn about it, and then enhance down the track. For me, and that is about the change control, you know, the scope control that protects your time and budget. But also builds you a roadmap for future. You don't just kind of say, no, we can't. You don't want to do that. It's really negative. It's great ideas. They'll all spin up. Keep them, save them, and do them, and hold them for later development when you can prioritize and rescope and recost those pieces. That protects your original budget. It keeps you on track, keeps you on time, which is as important as the money. And the only thing I'd add on top of that, actually, having been very hardline, keep yourself in discipline, is actually have contingency as well. You want a bit of headroom. You want a bit of freedom to learn and innovate a little bit while you go. So have yourself, have your outset plan, give yourself some contingency on top of that to do some of those nice to have pieces that come on, because they really help to enthuse and keep your team going. But do hold a line, and know and remember the value of getting that first implementation in, because that then frees up your time, helps you achieve stuff, helps you feel good. Hey, we've succeeded here, and gives you the enthusiasm and the motivation to do the next wave when it's appropriate.
And I think to add to that, Rob, speak to references. If you're speaking to a consulting partner or another vendor, if it's not Salesforce, ask them for references, not just the references they give you, but go find your own references, because the best network is the non-profit network, and people's experience. What would you recommend? What were the gotchas? That there's real power in people's experiences.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So yeah, I should have said that, because that's something we bang on about. When we're talking to clients, talk to organisations you recognise, look back to you, do what you do, and have been there and learn from them. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm going to come to some of the other questions that have come in. So I think maybe Leanne, this is one for you. What features and modules are in the non-for-profit success pack, and what is the additional stroke missing when compared with another CRM, for example, RENXT?
Well, I think I can answer that one well, having worked with Razor's Edge for such a long time and loving that product. So the non-profit success pack, there's a huge amount of capability, but we sort of focus on the three main components, and that is fundraising and engagement, program management, and gosh, my mind just went, and grant management. So I wish I'd put a slide up now, Rob and Joyce, but that we have this slide that one of the ways we think we're different is we put the customer, so the nonprofit, at the center of everything that we do, and we allow our customers to put their supporter at the heart of everything they do. So the idea is this central CRM system. So if you can imagine any of the components that any of the capabilities you would need from technology are there in the nonprofit success pack or the nonprofit cloud. So again, fundraising and income management, membership management, grant management, case management, service desk, digital engagement. And interestingly, you don't have to use Salesforce just for CRM. You could just use our online engagement products for email and social. And then you also have program management, so actually managing the delivery of your work. So that it's a hugely capable system. It does everything an off-the-shelf fundraising package would, everything you would expect from, for example, a Razor's Edge NXT or a thank you. It does all of that. And I think there's a misconception that you have to build it. We've built it. We just need to tailor it for your needs. One of the things that we don't focus on, it doesn't do, is sort of HR accounting, but we have integrations with most of the HR and accounting packages. So that would be something that would be part of either an integrated piece or two systems.
Perfect.
I think the only thing, just because it's topical from a conversation I had earlier in the week, Leanne, is volunteer management's in the MPSP as well, isn't it? That's another key thing for the sector. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah,
perfect.
And then not just, you take that one step further, right? So you can manage volunteers, memberships, like all of your different stakeholder types. We have this amazing online community. So we call it Experience Cloud. It was previously Community Cloud. So this idea of engaging with people online. So having volunteers update their preferences, add their hours, having alumni connect with your university. So that the ability to, we talk a lot about the 360 degree of the supporter, so that you can personalize their experience. And through Experience Cloud, you can do that in an online fashion as well.
Perfect. I was just going to say, Leanne, we'll be sending out a link to the Salesforce definitive guide to attendees afterwards. So if you want to send us that slide, we can make sure it goes out with that information on it as well, if that's useful.
Thank you. That's great.
So another question that come in is saying, currently have Salesforce, but it's not being used and holds huge amounts of data, much of it outdated. Have been tasked with implementing a new grants management systems. Tips on where to start. Who will I go to? I'm going to go to Rob first, and then I'll come to Leanne.
I mean, where to start is, for me, would be essentially to do an analysis. So it is that same requirements gathering piece. Don't worry about the fact that you currently have Salesforce in place. Still go out to your organization and talk about what it is you're trying to achieve, what are your objectives, and what are the technology requirements underneath that. You've got a great piece of tech which sounds like it's not being used and exploited the way it should be. So essentially, you can then do a gap analysis between what it is you need, which you've now, you know, documented and agreed across the organization, what it is the current technology is, maybe do it twofold, maybe kind of what is the technology actually being used for, discuss, and more importantly, maybe what data have you currently got in it which helps to power your mission, you know, because that's what a lot of this is all about. Do that gap analysis and then look at how you can, I mean, you know, bring in experts, almost certainly bring in experts to help you get the best out of Salesforce. It's very likely that it's going to enable you to achieve your objectives. There is obviously an option where actually you do something completely left field now that you didn't used to and need to look a little bit wider. But certainly as a starting point, you would expect to be able to reconfigure Salesforce with expert help to be able to achieve what you're looking to, what you're setting out to do.
Leanne, yeah.
I can add to that. I would say, you know, if you are looking for some help and support and you don't have time to go do that, you know, we can get you off to a good start. So your Salesforce account executive, and if you don't know who that is, you know, feel free to get in touch with me. We can just have a chat about, you know, what you're using today, what does the future look like. So, but Rob covered it well.
Perfect. Well, I think one of the questions we were going to cover was around there is a volume of lots of support resources available, you know, for Salesforce. Leanne, did you want to just touch on those briefly? I'm conscious of time because we've got lots of more questions coming in.
Good. Okay. I think I love the free resources that we have at Salesforce. I think first off, I think Salesforce were one of the pioneers of customer success, and you know, every day we talk about success and impact delivery being, you know, so key to how we support the nonprofit sector. But the other thing is, I've talked about Trailhead. Trailhead is not just for Salesforce customers. Anyone can use Trailhead. You can sign up, get a license, get a login and start to learn. And again, it's not just Salesforce technology. It's like best practice use of online engagement or fundraising best practice, the UN Declaration of Human Rights. There's some really interesting things in there for learning. We have product support, customer support, online knowledge base. We have amazing user groups. The really crazy thing that happened recently, Joyce, is we had the London user group, right? The London charity user group happened about 3 months ago, and I think, sorry, 2 months ago, and there's another one coming up in June, and it wasn't London anymore. We had people dialing in from, you know, from Europe, from, you know, lots of different places, and it was fascinating just to see how this, you know, work from anywhere has opened up the ability for even more people to engage. So lots of user groups. We have an incredible online community. We call it the Power of Us Hub, and that's where there are 51,000 registered nonprofits, partners and Salesforce employees that all come together to share best practice. The stat is 99% of questions raised on the online hub by charities are answered within 24 hours. And a lot of the times it's by other charities. So there's a great community there. And then for larger organizations that want more hands-on support, we also have this sort of tier of support that we call Premier Success, and that brings more support. So it's regular one-to-ones, roundtables, best practice groups, peer networking, customer advisory boards. So there's a lot of support out there, hopefully.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's amazing. I didn't actually realize it was that much. I knew there was a lot. I didn't realize it was that much. That's brilliant. One of the other questions coming in is, does Salesforce have its own integrated mailing product for marketing campaigns, or is it normally implemented with a link to a third-party product? I don't know, Rob.
We've seen both. So we have integrations to Outlook, to MailChimp, to .digital, so that we can integrate to any online platform, but we also have our own. So there are two different types of online engagement. One that's called Pardot. It's a product that we've had for some time, and that is online engagement. It's online social media interaction. It's friendly email. It's email engagement segmentation, and then we have this sort of larger, more sophisticated digital engagement for all sorts of engagement that we call Marketing Cloud. Marketing Cloud is sort of, you know, premier, best in class, a very large in scope online engagement system.
I think the point I made, so what it brings to mind is actually something we haven't mentioned within the whole proposition in the nonprofit cloud is that is the app exchange, yeah, where you have got, so if somebody wants to think about, you know, well, one of the great things about Salesforce is its ability to integrate. It's designed to be integrated with, and you've got in the App Exchange, you've got all these pre-certified, basically plug and play type integrations. It's a great place to go and look for, you know, which email marketing systems, you know, the MailChimp, etc., .digital And so which ones, is there effectively a kind of a native integration with already? It's a great place, but it's a great resource anyway, but a great place to answer a question like that.
And the best way to describe the App Exchange is, if there's something you want to do in Salesforce that maybe the capability isn't there, someone has come across that before. With 50,000 nonprofits using the system and 200,000 organizations around the world, someone's come across it. Whether it's selling, I don't know, doing a raffle, doing an auction, something that's quite specific we haven't built in the platform, there will be an app for it.
Perfect. There is one question come in which I don't think we'll cover here, but I will make sure that we follow up it afterwards. It's a question around some of the features and additional costs in the non-for-profit pack, and it's listed out quite a few. So I think we can cover that offline, but we can equally send the answer out to the group so everybody can see it. But I just think there's a few to cover, so we'll make sure we cover that off in a follow-up. The next question was, when operating on the free licenses, what would you be paying a partner to implement the system, or would also that be free?
I hate to say this, but it depends, because we have some nonprofits that might have moved from one of the fundraising packages we talked about earlier, but they only have 7 people in the fundraising team using the system. So there's no cost for the technology, but you would want to pay a partner to do the migration. Think about data security and bringing that data across. But then we also have lots of organizations that, for example, might just use it to call volunteers, record how they're use volunteers to call, vulnerable and elderly people. They wouldn't necessarily need a lot of help and support. So I'd also think that there's definitely something to be said in this sort of idea that you hear of free is not free. So I can say 10 free licenses. But if you just download a free trial, apply for the 10 licenses and try to start using Salesforce, I think you would quite quickly get lost unless you do commit that time into using Trailhead and really understanding it, watching some free online demos. So a partner is definitely your best way to get the most value out of Salesforce technology. But I will do a little plug for something I missed earlier, Joyce, which is pro bono. And this is for existing customers or potential new customers. We have a huge network, 67,000 employees, Salesforce employees around the world. And one of the 111 model is everyone has up to 7 days of working time to give back to the nonprofit sector. So there are lots. So what you can do is actually apply for a pro bono project, and that could have a Salesforce architect or a Salesforce consultant or a support customer success person do a little bit of work with you that helps sort of accelerate some of the things you do on the platform. So if you have a need, that's not a big migration from a fundraising package, that probably wouldn't be what we cover, but you want to set up something specific, you can actually apply for pro bono, which is fantastic.
Yeah, that really is, absolutely. One question, and I think the answer possibly will depend on what you're doing, but I'm not going to preempt your answers, is do I need to replace my website to get the best out of Salesforce? I'm going to go to Rob on this one first.
Absolutely not. No, you don't have to. Obviously, we can spend the next hour talking about kind of what you want to deliver through the web, through the, if you like, the external facing, side of your digital platforms through your website. There are options. So Leanne mentioned earlier, effectively that to just humanize it, just the portal aspect, if you like, of Salesforce, where you put in, tools into the hands of your donors and supporters and volunteers, etc. That can be implemented as part of Salesforce. It can be skinned to look like your website. It can be run separate. It doesn't have to be embedded. So you can absolutely continue with your existing website pretty much as it stands and implement Salesforce alongside it if that's your preference and if it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, I agree with that, Rob. I think if an organisation replaces donation pages, an online community, or their CMS, it's more opportunistic. An organisation might say, actually, we've decided that we want to have a whole new website. Do you have a CMS, Salesforce? Yes, we do. Or we're not getting what we need from our donation pages. Do you have donation? Yes, we do. So you wouldn't expect to have to take everything out to implement Salesforce. You can continue with what you're doing, and we and the partner will work with you on how to integrate and bring that information into the CRM. Again, just back to that 360-degree view, bringing everything into one place. But no, you don't have to change the website.
Perfect. And one question, which is around, are there any good examples of non-for-profits who've benefited from Salesforce? Well, we obviously all know the answer is yes. I didn't know, and this is a completely putting you on the spot. You know, is there maybe looking for a sort of small scale or a large scale, an example of each that maybe you could talk about? And again, totally putting you on the spot.
Well, I'll talk about the public-facing customer stories, and we have a lot of those on our website. There are a lot of those also recorded. So if you go to YouTube and look for salesforce.org, there's recorded demos and customer stories. The couple that I love, so Bernardo's, hopefully everyone knows Bernardo's in the UK, incredible organisation, decided to replace their fundraising system in 2017, I think they went live. So they now use Salesforce technology for all of their fundraising, CRM, GDPR was a big sort of accelerator towards that project. So they also moved, at that time, 25,000 regular donors. So as you can imagine, quite a complex, sophisticated fundraising program across all different channels, moved onto Salesforce. And then another different example is a membership organization who've just gone live, actually, CIPD. So that is, sorry, I wrote my notes down. So a professional body for HR and people development. And what we did there was we consolidated 3 different CRM systems. So now they have one view of all members, and they also use Salesforce for their service desk. So if you are a CIPD member, you call in with an inquiry, a query, you want to change something in your membership, that all runs through Salesforce. So 2 quite different ones. And just to give you an example of a very small organization, we worked at the very start of the pandemic, we worked with one of the age offices in a small town who really wanted to contact all of their vulnerable and elderly people, but they couldn't have volunteers come in and use the paper and pen system. So with one of our pro bono programs, we set them up with an online system so volunteers could call from home, log their information on the system, and make sure that the people in the community were looked after and had what they needed. So that was a very small and again free because it was pro bono, and ranging right up to Bernardo's, a couple of UK stories.
Fantastic, that's brilliant and excellent, putting you on the spot there. And then I suppose to tie in with a question that's come in, and the question that's come in is, if you had a number one lessons learned from any implementations, what it would be. And I suppose I kind of really wanted to follow that on with as well around, CRM projects, people often underestimate the amount of time and work and everything that's gone into them. So with that question in mind about sort of lessons learned from implementation, what advice would you give to people considering taking on, doing a CRM project? I'm going to go to Rob first.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I mean, implementation projects, any CRM implementation project, it is really easy to underestimate, like you say, and what you need to mitigate is kind of running out of energy during the implementation, especially since, getting the technology live is the building block of what you're trying to achieve. Yeah, it's not the end game, is it? It's about being able to better, serve your mission, serve your cause. So bear that in mind, and don't drain all the life and energy out of your organization and your people through the implementation project. Invest in it. Keep an eye on the prize at the end of it. Upscale your ambition and upscale your expectations to meet what you need to achieve. So basically, it's about preparation. Prepare yourself, prepare your organization for the effort it's going to take, the disruption it's going to cause, but equally for the value that it will bring, because you have to know that it's worth it, and you have to go out there and sell that message. Don't take it for granted that everybody will just think, oh great, we're going to get some new tech. Or actually, that's the last thing you want them to be thinking. What you want them to see is the investment you're making and the value you're going to bring to your organization, to your cause. So that upfront communication about who's going to be impacted, what's coming, why it's coming, and the collaboration around, oh yeah, but, because people are going to have questions, you've got to be really open and listen, collaborate, help people to understand it. And this is all before you've even embarked on the project itself. And then I think for the actual project, it then comes down to probably resourcing in that wider sense. Make sure that your business leads, your subject matter experts, they need the time and effort and the headspace to focus on the project. And if that means you need to backfill some people, then brace yourself and do it. You will get the value out of it, and that's going to be the recurring theme. Look for, we talked about specialist support. If your delivery team doesn't include people who basically carry the scars of the projects they've done before, where they've hit issues and they've hit blocks, but they've recovered that, they've delivered the projects. If they're not, if those people aren't in your team, then it's not the team you're going to need. Yeah, it doesn't matter on small or big. You need people who understand that there are challenges in any kind of project like this. Data migration is something that, you know, Liam just mentioned. It's underneath all of this. It's always difficult as well. There's lots of components to successful implementation, and you really want people involved who are committed to getting it right, who've been there with organizations like you, yeah, with projects like yours, to get them on your side, yeah, and again, prepare yourself, get them involved as part of your team in whatever format that takes, and that stretches on. And actually, part of your team is the technology partner that you choose, and that's the way to think about it. They're not suppliers, they're not people who just sell you licenses. They are part of your team, and they are absolutely intrinsic to your success. So get them on board, get the right people, invest in the process that identifies who they are, the piece we talked about, organizational culture, make sure it's a fit, make sure it's a match, bring them in, and yeah, and treat them as part of your team. And then go into the project, you know, open-minded, be robust, you know, be disciplined, but be open-minded, be flexible, learn as you go. You can't possibly know everything at the outset, and that's okay. That's half the point, really. So just that little bit of adaptability as you go through it as well. And yeah, then you have every chance of success. There are lots and lots of fantastic organizations who have implemented Salesforce and other technologies and are getting the benefit of having done so and able to fulfill their mission better because of it.
Yes, absolutely. Leanne,
I'm just going to add to that, Joyce. This is going to be really exciting. I know that there are a lot of organizations out there listening today or watching the webinar later, just interested in what's out there, because there are a lot of, particularly in the fundraising space, there are a lot of legacy systems that are going out of support. And it is, you know, the time is ticking on having to make that change. So there's a bit of a, you know, we speak to a lot of charities that are a bit like, oh gosh, we're so worried because we're going out of support. This system does mostly what we need, and we need the new system to do just that too. So a lot of organizations are being forced out to market because either it's time they made a change that they have to make a change, or it's not doing what we need and it's time to make that change. But I will say it's exciting. The hardest part about a project, in my view, is the change management. You don't want to go through all the pain that Rob was just talking us through, like, you know, of making that change, only for people to say, I'm not going to put my major donor information in there. I'm not going to update actions and activity. So I think bring that excitement into your project. As you're getting demos from vendors or looking at solutions, you know, have people come and put their eyes on it and see what the world could look like on Salesforce, how amazing fundraising could be, and what artificial intelligence really means for fundraising programs. So get people involved so that they feel part of the decision. And when you go through that, you know, the project, you know, there's a lot that goes into it, but at the end, you want people to feel really engaged and feel that excitement. And one of the things that we love is the go live, you know, the big party where you get cake in, and hopefully when we're back in the office, cake and, you know, Salesforce pens, and you know, make everyone feel like this is the next step in our technology evolution.
Fantastic, brilliant. Thank you very much. So I was just going to, if I can get my computer to work, just to say that thank you for that. I mean, it's been really, really insightful, and thank you everyone for putting in your questions. They've been really great, and we will follow up with the one specifically that we didn't get to cover off. Just to say that, as Rob has mentioned, we've put together the Salesforce Definitive Guide, so we will be sending you out the link to that afterwards. And then Leanne, if there's any additional information you want us to send out, that's absolutely no problem at all. So just to say thank you very much. I think, you know, the key message is, absolutely, there's lots of support out there for Salesforce, lots of people you can speak to find out more. So, you know, use those resources, and it's definitely worth considering. A lot of the misconceptions, hopefully we've managed to bust them this morning. But, you know, if you have any more questions, you know, do follow up. We'll make sure that we answer them. So trying to be a good project manager and keeping to time, I'd just like to say thank you very much to Leanne and Rob for this morning. That's been really, really useful. And we will hopefully see you all again soon on another session.
Thank you.
Thanks.